Hey guys, tonight we step quietly into a medieval infirmary where the air smells faintly of herbs, old wood, and a confidence that is wildly undeserved. You're lying on a straw mattress, listening to the slow drip of water somewhere in the dark, while a man with no formal medical training but an extremely strong opinion approaches your bedside. His hands are stained with something brownish. Don't ask. And he smiles like this is all perfectly normal. You probably won't survive this, but don't worry, neither did most people, so at least you're fitting in.
So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're awake enough, drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're sick. Not dramatically sick, just enough that medieval society has decided to intervene. And intervention, in this era, often makes things worse. One of the most mainstream medical beliefs you're about to experience is the theory of the four humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Your entire health is believed to depend on keeping these liquids in perfect balance. If you feel weak, dizzy, feverish, or just vaguely unwell, the obvious solution is to remove some blood. A lot of blood. Because if something is wrong inside you, surely taking vital fluids out will help. It's medieval logic at its finest.
So you're held down, gently but firmly, and a vein is opened. The bowl fills. You feel lightheaded, then oddly calm, then extremely tired. This practice, bloodletting, is one of the most widespread medical treatments in medieval Europe, inherited from ancient Greek and Roman medicine. It's used for everything from headaches to plague symptoms. Historians still argue whether bloodletting occasionally helped in very specific cases, or whether it was almost always a slow-motion disaster. Either way, if you're already weak, losing blood is not doing you any favors.
And bloodletting is just the warm-up act. If that doesn't work, there's purging. You swallow a concoction designed to make you vomit, sweat, or experience what we'll politely call intestinal urgency. The idea is to expel bad humors, bad spirits, or bad vibes. Science is flexible like that. A quirky but well-documented tidbit is that some purgatives included heavy metals like mercury. Yes, mercury, the shiny stuff that everyone now agrees you should absolutely not ingest. At the time, though, it's considered powerful medicine. You don't feel cured, but you do feel like lying very, very still afterward.
Then there's surgery. Medieval surgery exists, but it's not what you're hoping for. Surgeons are often barbers, because if you can shave a beard, you can probably amputate a limb. That's the logic. Tools are reused, rarely cleaned, and definitely not sterilized. Infection is not understood in the modern sense. Germs won't be a thing for several more centuries. So when a wound turns black and smells terrible, it's blamed on bad air or divine displeasure, not bacteria. You're told to pray harder. Solid medical advice.
One mainstream fact that quietly shapes everything here is that medieval medicine relies heavily on ancient texts. Works by Hippocrates and Galen are treated almost like sacred scripture. If Galen says something, it's true, even if Galen learned it by dissecting monkeys instead of humans. Questioning these authorities is rare because knowledge is supposed to be preserved, not challenged. Innovation is suspicious. If a treatment has been used for 1,000 years, that must mean it works, right? Sometimes medicine turns to the animal kingdom for help, and this is where things get truly inventive. You're prescribed powdered deer antler, crushed pearls, or fat rendered from a snake. One particularly memorable remedy involves applying a poultice made of crocodile dung. This is real. The logic is unclear, but the confidence is absolute. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen? It comes back later in stranger ways than you'd expect. Historians still argue whether these animal-based remedies had any placebo effect, or whether the psychological comfort was the only benefit. You also encounter astrology, because of course you do. The timing of your treatment matters just as much as the treatment itself. Bloodletting, for example, must be done when the stars are aligned correctly.
If Mars is in the wrong position, your doctor might tell you to wait, even if you're actively deteriorating. The cosmos, it seems, has a scheduling conflict. This blending of medicine and astrology is completely mainstream at the time. The universe is involved in your health, whether you like it or not.
Now, let's talk about anesthesia, or rather, the creative absence of it. Pain relief exists in the form of alcohol, opium-derived substances, or a sponge soaked in herbs like mandrake. You bite down on a piece of wood because that's just good manners. A light joke circulates among surgeons that if the patient stops screaming, the operation is either going very well or very badly. You try not to think about which one applies to you.
Despite all this, medieval people aren't stupid. They're working with the knowledge they have. Herbal medicine, for example, sometimes genuinely helps. Willow bark contains salicylic acid, a precursor to aspirin. Honey has antibacterial properties and is used on wounds with some success. These moments of accidental effectiveness are like tiny islands of sanity in a sea of questionable decisions. Historians still argue whether medieval healers understood why these remedies worked, or simply observed that they sometimes did.
But the real danger comes from overconfidence. Treatments are applied aggressively, repeatedly, and to entire populations. During outbreaks of illness, mass bloodletting sessions weaken communities already struggling with malnutrition and stress. Children, the elderly, and the poor suffer the most. You can almost feel humanity wobbling a bit here, leaning dangerously close to the edge, all because everyone agrees this is the correct way to heal.
And yet, you survive. Maybe not because of the medicine, but in spite of it. Your body rests, recovers, adapts. The healer nods solemnly, convinced his methods worked. Another bowl is washed, another remedy is prepared. The system continues, largely unquestioned, for centuries. As you drift off, you realize something quietly unsettling. For a very long time, the act of trying to help was sometimes the most dangerous thing of all.
You lie back on your straw mattress, listening to the night sounds outside the infirmary walls. Your pulse slower now, your thoughts softer. Tomorrow, if you're still here, there will be another remedy, another theory, another confident explanation. For now, though, you rest, suspended between survival and tradition, letting sleep take you somewhere far gentler than medieval medicine ever was.
You wake up hungry, which in medieval life is not a dramatic statement, but a permanent condition. Hunger isn't a sudden emergency here. It's a low, steady companion that walks beside you from childhood to old age. Food exists, of course, but the way you eat it, prepare it, and understand it quietly shapes whether you'll grow strong, grow weak, or simply fade early. No one is trying to wipe out humanity on purpose, but the menu alone sometimes feels like it's plotting something.
Your daily diet depends almost entirely on where you sit in society. If you're wealthy, you eat meat, lots of it. Beef, pork, mutton, sometimes game birds, often salted, smoked, or preserved until it's aggressively chewy. Vegetables are considered peasant food, suspiciously linked to poverty and weakness. A mainstream historical fact is that medieval elites genuinely believed too many fruits and vegetables caused illness, upsetting the balance of the humors. So you eat heavy meat pies and white bread, wondering why you feel sluggish all the time. Spoiler, it's not because you're too relaxed. If you're poor, your diet is mostly bread. Dark bread, coarse bread, bread made from barley or rye or whatever grains survived the season. Bread is breakfast, lunch, dinner, and emotional support. Sometimes you get pottage, a thick stew of grains, beans, and whatever vegetables are available. Meat appears rarely, like a special guest who doesn't stay long. The calories keep you alive, but barely. Micronutrients are not part of the conversation yet, and deficiencies quietly set up camp inside your bones.
One of the biggest long-term threats is something you don't notice at first: malnutrition. You don't collapse dramatically. Instead, your teeth weaken, your immune system struggles, your growth slows. Rickets, scurvy, and anemia appear across populations, though no one calls them that yet.
A quirky but real tidbit is that sailors later recognized scurvy as a disease of long voyages, but medieval inland populations suffer milder versions simply from seasonal food scarcity. Historians still argue whether medieval people recognized nutritional disease as a distinct problem or simply accepted chronic weakness as part of life.
Then there's fasting. Fasting isn't optional, it's religiously required. The church mandates dozens of fasting days each year, some banning meat, others banning animal products entirely. On paper, this sounds manageable. In practice, it means large portions of the population regularly restrict already limited nutrition. Fish becomes the substitute, but preserved fish is often salty and low in nutrients. You comply because salvation matters, and also because everyone else is doing it. Humanity collectively shrugs and powers through. Food safety is optimistic. Grain storage is imperfect, and mold is common. Rye infected with ergot fungus occasionally enters the food supply. When you eat it, strange things happen. Hallucinations, convulsions, burning sensations in the limbs. This condition, later called ergotism or St. Anthony's fire, sweeps through communities in waves. You don't know your bread is poisoned. You just know something feels very wrong. Some scholars even suggest ergot outbreaks influenced religious visions. Historians still argue whether ergotism was as widespread as later writers claim, but when it hit hard. You drink constantly, but not much water. Clean water is unreliable, especially in towns. So you drink ale, weak ale, brewed at home, consumed by adults and children alike. It's safer than river water, but it's still alcohol. Dehydration, dental issues, and dependency quietly stack up over generations. This isn't a drunken society. It's a society choosing the least dangerous liquid available. Not exactly a glowing endorsement of medieval infrastructure.
Meat preservation introduces another slow problem: salt. Lots of it. Salted meat keeps longer, but high salt intake strains kidneys and contributes to chronic illness. You don't connect the dots, you just feel older than you should. A light joke circulates in modern hindsight. Medieval people didn't need vampire myths to fear salt. It was already haunting their dinner tables. Cooking methods don't help much either. Everything is boiled, stewed, or baked to within an inch of its life. Vitamins disappear quietly into the steam. Vegetables lose potency. The goal is fullness, not nourishment. When famine strikes, and it does, repeatedly, your body has no reserves. Entire regions weaken at once, making them more vulnerable to disease, invasion, and social collapse. You can almost feel humanity wobbling again. Not dramatically, just tired. And yet, there are moments of accidental wisdom. Medieval people eat fermented foods, cheese, yogurt-like curds, sourdough bread. These help gut health in ways no one understands yet. Garlic and onions, common among peasants, offer mild antimicrobial benefits. Ironically, the poor sometimes eat better than the rich, at least nutritionally. Historians still argue whether class-based diets contributed measurably to differences in life expectancy, or whether everything was equally bad, just in different flavors.
Then there are food taboos. Certain animals are avoided. Certain combinations are feared. Eating cold foods in winter or hot foods in summer is believed to disrupt humoral balance. You plan meals like a chemistry experiment you're not allowed to understand. The wrong apple at the wrong time could theoretically ruin your health. You comply because no one wants to be the guy who died from seasonal fruit irresponsibility.
Children suffer the most. Weaning foods are often thin gruels lacking nutrients. Milk spoils quickly. Infant mortality is staggering. You don't mourn loudly anymore. It's too common. From a population perspective, this constant nutritional strain means fewer strong adults, fewer healthy births, and slower recovery after disasters. No single meal causes extinction, but together they push humanity closer to the edge than anyone realizes.
As night settles in, you scrape the last crumbs from your bowl. You're not starving tonight, which feels like success. Your stomach is full, your body tired, your bones quietly negotiating tomorrow. You lie back, listening to the household settle. unaware that something as simple as bread and broth has shaped your entire destiny. Sleep comes slowly, heavy and familiar, carrying you through another day fueled by just enough to survive, but never quite enough to thrive.
You walk through your village with the quiet understanding that unseen forces are always watching, not metaphorically, literally. Every illness, accident, bad harvest, or sudden pain has a reason, and that reason is rarely random. In medieval life, faith is not a private comfort, it's an operating system. And when things go wrong, advice arrives not from doctors, but from sermons, neighbors, and well-meaning elders who are absolutely certain they're helping. A mainstream historical fact settles over everything here. Medieval Europe interprets most misfortune through a religious lens. God rewards, God punishes, God tests. Disease is often understood as a moral event, not a biological one. So when you fall ill, the first question isn't, what happened to your body, but what did you do? You mentally review your recent behavior, wondering if that skipped prayer or mildly rude thought about the baker finally caught up with you. The recommended treatment is repentance. You're encouraged to confess sins, attend Mass more frequently, and endure suffering patiently. Pain, after all, cleanses the soul. This belief offers emotional structure, but medically, it can be catastrophic. Instead of rest and nourishment, you fast. Instead of isolation during contagious illness, you gather in churches to pray together. It's spiritually efficient and epidemiologically disastrous. Historians still argue whether church gatherings significantly accelerated the spread of disease, or whether they were simply one factor among many. Then there's folk wisdom, passed down with absolute confidence and zero peer review. Someone tells you your fever is caused by evil spirits escaping through your pores. The solution? Wrap yourself tightly in blankets and sweat it out. Another insists cold water shocks illness away, so you're marched to a stream in winter. A third recommends placing a dead toad near your bed to absorb sickness. You don't ask how the toad feels about this arrangement. Charms and amulets become part of daily healthcare. You wear written prayers around your neck, sewn into tiny pouches. Saints specialize in ailments, one for headaches, another for toothaches, another for plague. You're encouraged to appeal strategically, like customer service escalation, but divine. A quirky but well-documented tidbit is that people sometimes swallowed written prayers on parchment, believing the words themselves held healing power. Paper cuts, but make them spiritual. Pilgrimage is another popular prescription. If you're sick, you travel, sometimes long distances, to a holy site. You walk for weeks, sleeping poorly, eating less, exposing yourself to weather and strangers. From a modern perspective, it's the exact opposite of recovery. But spiritually, it makes sense. You're showing devotion. If you survive the journey, it's proof of faith. If you don't, well, God works in mysterious ways. Light joke number 1 quietly surfaces here. Medieval healthcare occasionally resembles a very slow fitness challenge no one asked for. During outbreaks, fear sharpens beliefs into dangerous certainty. Illness becomes evidence of collective sin. Communities search for causes they can see and punish. Marginalized groups, foreigners, the poor, religious minorities, are accused of angering God or spreading corruption. Instead of improving sanitation or limiting contact, energy pours into blame. Historians still argue whether these reactions were driven more by fear or by long-standing social tensions finally boiling over. Children absorb these ideas early. You're taught that obedience keeps you healthy and disobedience invites sickness. A scraped knee isn't just an accident, it's a lesson. This worldview provides order, but it also discourages questioning. If illness has a moral cause, experimenting with new treatments feels almost disrespectful. Why fix what God deliberately broke? Yet faith isn't only harmful here. It offers comfort in a world with very little control. When survival rates are low, belief gives meaning to loss. Hospitals, often run by religious orders, provide food, shelter, and basic care. Monasteries preserve medical texts and herbal knowledge. This dual role, comfort and constraint,
defines medieval spirituality. Historians still argue whether religion overall slowed medical progress or quietly preserved it through turbulent centuries.
Some advice walks the line between spiritual and practical in oddly specific ways. You're warned not to bathe too often because opening your pores allows evil vapors in. Cleanliness becomes suspicious. Perfumes and herbs are used instead, not to remove dirt, but to mask smells believed to carry disease. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen? The logic is similar. If it smells strong, it must be doing something important. Light joke number 2 floats by gently. Medieval noses work overtime as diagnostic tools.
Dreams are taken seriously too. If you dream of certain animals or colors, it's interpreted as a health warning. A snake might mean internal imbalance. Fire suggests fever. You report dreams like lab results, hoping someone translates them into actionable advice. Sometimes the advice is to pray more. Sometimes it's to avoid cheese for a month. Both are delivered with equal authority.
Exorcism enters the picture when symptoms defy explanation. Seizures, mental illness, or sudden personality changes are often framed as possession. Rituals are performed: loud prayers, holy water, fasting, occasionally restraint. From your perspective, something is wrong inside your mind or body, but the response treats it as an invasion. Historians still argue how many cases labeled possession were actually neurological or psychological conditions misunderstood by the time.
Despite the risks, people genuinely believe they're helping. Advice is given with care, urgency, and love. Your neighbors don't want you to die. They just don't know how to prevent it. Everyone operates within the same framework, reinforcing it daily. When someone recovers after prayer, belief strengthens. When someone dies, belief explains it. The system is self-sealing. As evening falls, bells ring in the distance. You kneel, tired, sore, faithful. You followed the advice. You fasted, prayed, worn the charm, avoided suspicious foods, and ignored that persistent cough because questioning it feels wrong. You're not reckless, you're obedient. And in this world, obedience feels like safety. You lie down, hands folded, breath slow. Tomorrow, if you're worse, there will be more prayers, more advice, more certainty. For now, you rest inside a belief system that comforts and confines you at the same time. Sleep settles gently, carrying your worries upward, where answers are promised, but rarely delivered. You march because everyone marches. War in medieval life isn't a rare eruption, it's a rhythm. Seasons turn, crops grow, and armies move through the countryside like weather systems made of steel and opinions. You don't question it much. War is where honor lives, where loyalty is proven, and where, inconveniently, entire populations quietly sabotage their own chances of survival. A mainstream historical fact sets the tone. Medieval armies are not professional standing forces for most of this period. They're temporary collections of farmers, knights, mercenaries, and whoever owed someone a favor. You leave home with minimal training, inconsistent equipment, and a belief that courage will cover the gaps. It often doesn't. Disease, not combat, kills the majority of soldiers, and then politely follows them home afterward. Camp life is where things begin to unravel. You sleep close together, share utensils, and drink from questionable water sources. Waste disposal is theoretical. Latrines exist, but discipline doesn't always. Fleas, lice, and rats thrive. The army becomes a mobile ecosystem designed to spread illness efficiently across regions. Historians still argue whether medieval commanders understood the connection between camp hygiene and sickness, or simply accepted mass illness as unavoidable. Food logistics don't help. Armies forage aggressively, stripping villages bare. Crops are trampled, livestock seized, grain stores emptied. This weakens civilians long after the army moves on. You might survive the march, but your family at home now faces famine. War doesn't just kill directly, it rearranges scarcity on a massive scale. Light joke number 1 drifts by. Medieval supply chains are basically, good luck everyone.
armor, that symbol of safety, brings its own problems. It's heavy, hot, and worn for long hours. You sweat constantly, dehydrating without realizing it. Minor wounds fester under metal plates. Taking armor off too often is risky. Leaving it on is worse. The body pays quietly. Historians still argue whether full plate armor significantly reduced battlefield mortality compared to earlier deer, but it certainly didn't improve long-term health. Then there's the obsession with melee combat. Battles are close, chaotic, intimate. Blood, breath, and bacteria mix freely. Even small cuts become dangerous without proper cleaning. After a battle, wounded men lie together, sharing space and infections. Surgeons, remember our barber friends, do what they can. Amputation is common, not always because it's necessary, but because it's fast. Speed matters more than precision when everyone is screaming.
War customs themselves sometimes amplify danger. Before battles, soldiers fast or pray instead of eating and resting. Victory is attributed to divine favor, defeat to moral failure. Tactical lessons are learned slowly because outcomes are explained spiritually. If you lose, it's not because your strategy failed, it's because God wanted a different outcome. Historians still argue whether this belief system delayed military innovation or simply coexisted with it.
Sieges are worse. You're trapped inside walls or surrounding them, depending on luck. Supplies dwindle. Water becomes contaminated. Rats flourish. In desperation, people eat things they normally wouldn't. Not dramatic cannibalism. We're keeping this PG. But definitely, this seemed like a good idea at the time meals. Disease spreads rapidly in enclosed spaces. Siege warfare doesn't just target cities, it targets the future population. Psychologically, war normalizes risk. You become accustomed to danger, pain, and loss. This spills into civilian life. Recklessness follows veterans home. Injuries linger untreated. Trauma is unnamed, but deeply felt. Families absorb returning soldiers who are changed, weakened, or chronically ill. The long tail of conflict stretches far beyond the battlefield.
One quirky but real tidbit, medieval armies often carried religious relics into battle, believing they offered protection. Bones of saints, fragments of cloth, bits of wood. These objects are handled, kissed, passed around. From a disease perspective, they're shared surfaces in the worst possible environment. Light joke number 2 whispers through, nothing brings people together like communal holiness and zero sanitation. Weapons themselves pose unexpected threats. Arrows and bolts are reused. If one misses, it's retrieved and fired again. Wounds caused by these weapons introduce whatever the arrow previously encountered: soil, manure, old blood, deep into tissue. Infection is almost guaranteed. Historians still argue whether medieval poisons were commonly used on weapons, or whether the danger mostly came from environmental contamination. Civilians aren't spared war habits either. Militias form, towns arm themselves, and everyone practices violence as a skill. Children grow up around weapons. Accidents happen. Training injuries go untreated. The normalization of combat bleeds into daily life, increasing mortality even in peacetime. Humanity doesn't just flirt with extinction on battlefields, it rehearses it at home. And yet, war drives some advancements. Better metallurgy, improved fortifications, rudimentary logistics. These developments slowly, indirectly improve survival. But progress is uneven and expensive. For every innovation, there's a generation weakened by its cost. Historians still argue whether medieval warfare ultimately accelerated technological growth or merely consumed it. As the campaign ends, you limp home. The road is quiet now. Fields are damaged, villages smaller. You carry stories, scars, and maybe something invisible incubating inside you. You survived the fighting, which feels like victory. But survival doesn't mean health, and health doesn't mean safety. You lie down that night, armor finally removed, muscles aching, breath shallow.
Somewhere in the dark, bells ring for the dead. War has passed through, leaving people thinner, tired, and just a little closer to the edge than before. Sleep comes slowly, heavy with exhaustion, carrying you forward into a world that keeps marching, whether it's ready or not. You hear it before you see it. A cough that lingers too long. A bell rung at the wrong hour. A door marked quietly so everyone knows to avoid it. Plague, sickness, pestilence, whatever name you give it. Disease in medieval life doesn't arrive alone. It brings fear, guesses, rituals, and a long list of human decisions that often make everything worse.
A mainstream historical fact anchors this moment. Medieval people have no understanding of germs or contagion as we know it. Disease is explained through miasma, bad air, or divine punishment, or unlucky planetary alignment. So when illness spreads, the response focuses on smells, morality, and motion, rather than isolation or hygiene. You open windows to let the bad air out, even in winter. You burn incense. You carry flowers. Your nose becomes a public health official.
One of the most famous examples, of course, is the Black Death. When it reaches your town, it doesn't knock, it floods in. People fall ill quickly, die suddenly, and leave everyone scrambling for meaning. In response, some towns organize prayer marches. Crowds move together through narrow streets, chanting and pleading. From a spiritual perspective, it feels proactive. From a disease perspective, it's a masterclass in efficient transmission. Historians still argue whether these gatherings significantly worsened outbreaks, or whether the scale of the plague made prevention nearly impossible anyway.
Then there's flight. If you can leave, you do. Families pack up and flee cities for the countryside. It feels sensible. Unfortunately, you don't leave alone. You carry fleas, lice, and infections with you, spreading disease to villages that were previously untouched. Plague doesn't respect your travel plans. Light joke number 1 drifts by gently. Medieval quarantine is mostly just panic with luggage.
Quarantine itself exists, but unevenly. Some ports begin isolating ships for 40 days, 40 giorni, giving us the word quarantine. This is one of those rare moments where medieval society stumbles onto something that works. But enforcement is inconsistent, and inland towns often ignore it entirely. Trade, after all, must continue. Bread matters. Money matters. Survival is complicated. Treatment during plagues is a familiar blend of confidence and chaos. Bloodletting returns, because apparently the solution to everything is still removing blood. People drink crushed emeralds, wear plague masks stuffed with herbs, or rub vinegar on their skin. Doctors dress like walking bouquets, believing strong smells repel illness. A quirky but real tidbit is that some people carried live chickens against their bodies, hoping the disease would transfer into the bird instead. The chicken, notably, is never consulted.
Blame becomes a coping mechanism. Communities look for someone to hold responsible. Outsiders, minorities, travelers, anyone different becomes suspicious. Violence erupts in places already weakened by disease. Instead of pooling resources and care, societies fracture. This social breakdown kills almost as effectively as the illness itself. Historians still argue whether these persecutions were driven primarily by fear of disease or by pre-existing prejudices amplified under stress.
Burial practices collapse under pressure. There are too many bodies. Graves are shallow. Sometimes mass pits are used. The dead remain close to the living. Animals roam. Water sources become contaminated. You try not to think about it as you draw water, but the thought lingers anyway. Light joke number 2 floats softly here. Medieval sanitation often operates on the principle of don't look too closely.
Healthcare systems, such as they are, buckle. Monasteries and hospitals fill beyond capacity. Caregivers fall ill. Knowledge disappears with them. You might receive help one day and find the doors closed the next. Survival becomes uneven, unpredictable. Entire skill sets vanish in a generation, slowing recovery long after the disease fades.
Plagues don't only kill directly, they alter behavior. Marriage patterns change, birth rates drop, fields go untilled,
Skills are lost. Children grow up without teachers. Humanity doesn't just lose numbers, it loses momentum. Recovery takes decades. Historians still argue whether repeated plagues fundamentally reshaped European society for the better by disrupting rigid systems, or whether the cost was too high to call it progress. And yet, people adapt. Some towns improve cleanliness, some restrict movement, some experiment quietly with new ideas about health. These changes are slow, fragile, and often forgotten when the danger passes. Fear fades faster than memory. The next outbreak finds society once again improvising. As the sickness recedes, survivors return. You step back into streets that feel wider now, quieter. Familiar faces are gone. Houses sit empty. There's relief, yes, but also a deep collective exhaustion. You survived, which feels almost awkward. What do you do with survival? That night, you lie down listening to the silence. No coughing nearby, no bells, just the sound of your own breathing, steady and precious. You don't know what caused the plague or why it spared you. You only know that human choices, movement, belief, fear, shaped its path as much as the disease itself. Sleep arrives slowly, wrapping around you like a promise not to ask questions tonight. Tomorrow will bring rebuilding, forgetting, and eventually another lesson waiting to be learned again. For now, you rest, still here, while history quietly exhales around you. You approach water cautiously, not because it's cold or scarce, but because you've been taught it might be dangerous. Cleanliness in medieval life is complicated. You approach water cautiously, not because it's cold or scarce, but because you've been taught it might be dangerous. Cleanliness in medieval life is complicated. It's not that people never wash, it's that washing is wrapped in rules, fears, and assumptions that quietly work against survival. You don't feel dirty most days. You feel careful. A mainstream historical fact frames this section clearly. Medieval Europeans do bathe, especially earlier in the period. But over time, public bathing declines, particularly after repeated plague outbreaks. Bathhouses, once social hubs, become suspect. Warm water is believed to open pores, and open pores invite bad air, disease, and divine misfortune straight into your body. So you limit baths, especially in winter or during illness. Staying closed, sealed, and slightly grimy feels safer. You wash hands and face occasionally, usually before meals or prayers. Full immersion is rare. Soap exists, made from animal fat and lye, but it's harsh and not universally available. Clean clothes are valued more than clean bodies. If your shirt is fresh, you're doing fine. The idea that invisible organisms live on skin hasn't arrived yet, so cleanliness focuses on appearance and smell, not microbes. Smell matters a lot. Strong odors are considered protective. You carry herbs, flowers, or spices to ward off illness. Perfume isn't vanity, it's defense. Houses are stuffed with aromatic plants. Streets are less aromatic, but everyone pretends not to notice. Light joke number 1 drifts by gently. Medieval noses work overtime as full-time health inspectors. Latrines exist, but their placement is optimistic. Waste is dumped into pits, rivers, or streets. In cities, chamber pots are emptied from windows with a warning shout. Sometimes. You learn to walk close to walls for shelter and far from walls for safety, which is a fun spatial contradiction. Water sources sit dangerously close to waste. Contamination is common, but invisible, so it's tolerated. One quirky but real tidbit involves lice. Lice are so common they're almost accepted as companions. Delousing becomes a social activity. People pick lice off each other's hair and clothing casually, like modern grooming rituals. There's even a quiet belief that lice are healthy, that they draw impurities out of the body. You might be itchy, but at least the toxins are leaving. Historians still argue whether this belief was widespread or limited to certain regions, but lice certainly enjoyed the arrangement. Laundry is labor-intensive.
Clothes are washed infrequently because water must be carried, heated, and reused carefully. Bedding is aired rather than washed. Sunlight is trusted more than soak. You beat blankets, hang them outside, and hope fresh air does something helpful. Sometimes it does. Often it doesn't.
During illness, hygiene myths intensify. You're advised not to change clothes too often because sickness can linger in fabric and reattach itself if disturbed. You stay wrapped in the same layers, sweating, conserving heat, and unfortunately, bacteria. Remember the sweating cures from earlier? They return here with confidence. Light joke number 2 whispers through. Medieval wellness culture really commits to the idea of just sweat it out.
Bathhouses, when they do exist, are communal. People share water. This is great for social bonding and terrible for disease control. Over time, as outbreaks are blamed on these spaces, they close. Something genuinely useful is abandoned because it feels suspicious. Historians still argue whether bathhouses actually contributed significantly to disease spread, or whether fear simply outpaced evidence.
Animals live close to humans. Very close. Chickens wander indoors. Pigs roam streets. Livestock share space, warmth, and parasites. Manure piles sit near homes. This proximity feels normal. You need animals to survive, but it creates constant exposure to zoonotic diseases. You don't know the term, but your immune system is very familiar with the concept. Water management improves slowly. Aqueducts exist in some places. Wells are maintained, but most people rely on surface water. When drought hits, quality drops. When rain hits, runoff contaminates everything. You adapt by drinking ale again. Weak, daily ale. It's safer than water, but not ideal. Your teeth and liver quietly protest. There are moments of surprising insight. Some towns pass cleanliness regulations. Streets are swept. Waste disposal is organized, loosely. During certain outbreaks, people intuitively isolate the sick, even without understanding why it helps. These flashes of common sense appear, fade, and reappear centuries later. Progress is not linear. It naps frequently. Cultural beliefs complicate everything. Nudity is morally suspicious. Bathing too often is associated with indulgence or sin. Cleanliness becomes a character trait rather than a health practice. You don't want to seem vain. Better to be humble and slightly smelly than healthy and morally questionable. Light joke number 3 floats by softly. Medieval self-care walks a fine line between hygiene and heresy. Children grow up absorbing these rules. They learn where to walk, what to touch, what to avoid. Accidents happen anyway. Infections follow small cuts. Scrapes linger. You survive childhood partly through luck and partly through resilience built under constant microbial pressure. Those who make it are tough, but the cost is high. Over generations, these hygiene myths quietly shape population health. Infections become chronic, recovery slows, epidemics find fertile ground. Humanity doesn't collapse outright, but it carries an unnecessary burden, all because water and soap are treated with suspicion. As evening comes, you wash your hands, carefully, briefly. You smooth your clothes, tuck herbs into a pouch, and feel reasonably protected. The routines are comforting, familiar. You don't. As evening comes, you wash your hands, carefully, briefly. You smooth your clothes, tuck herbs into a pouch, and feel reasonably protected. The routines are comforting, familiar. You don't know what you're missing, only what you've been told to avoid. You lie down, listening to the soft sounds of animals nearby, the creak of wood, the distant murmur of water you won't touch. Sleep settles in, heavy and warm. Tomorrow will bring more of the same careful uncleanliness, and you'll navigate it like everyone else, doing your best with the knowledge you have, edging humanity forward while quietly holding it back. You enter the world already behind the odds. Birth in medieval life is not a celebration first, it's a negotiation. Survival comes later, if at all. From the moment you're wrapped in cloth, customs meant to protect you sometimes do the opposite,
quietly thinning the next generation before it ever finds its footing. A mainstream historical fact sets the stage. Infant and child mortality rates in medieval Europe are extremely high. In some regions, nearly half of all children die before reaching adulthood. This isn't viewed as shocking, it's expected. You're loved, yes, but cautiously. Attachment grows slowly, because experience has taught everyone not to hope too hard.
Immediately after birth, you're swaddled tightly, arms pinned, legs straight, wrapped like a bundle of bread dough. Swaddling is believed to help bones grow straight and keep babies calm. In moderation, it does. In excess, it restricts movement, airflow, and sometimes breathing. You spend long hours immobile. Historians still argue whether swaddling significantly increased infant mortality or whether it simply reflected broader health challenges, but its intensity in some regions raises eyebrows.
Breastfeeding is common, but not universal. Wealthy families often hire wet nurses. This creates emotional and physical distance. Wet nurses may feed multiple infants, increasing the risk of disease transmission. If milk supply fails or a nurse becomes ill, babies suffer quickly. Formula doesn't exist. Alternatives include watered-down animal milk or thin gruel. Neither is nutritionally adequate. You grow, but slowly, fragile as a candle flame in a drafty room.
Weaning is risky. Too early and your immune system isn't ready. Too late and malnutrition sets in. Weaning foods are often bland porridges, lacking protein and vitamins. Clean preparation is rare. You ingest bacteria along with calories. Diarrheal illness becomes a leading killer, though no one names it as such. It's just something that happens. Light joke number 1 drifts softly here. Medieval baby food is less organic and more best of luck. Childcare practices lean heavily on tradition. Babies are left alone for long periods while adults work. Older siblings become caretakers before they're ready. Accidents happen. Fires, falls, animal bites. Homes are not designed with safety in mind. Everything is sharp, hot, or heavy. Survival teaches awareness early, or not at all.
Superstition shapes care in subtle ways. You're protected with charms against fairies, spirits, and the evil eye. Red thread, amulets, prayers whispered at night. These offer comfort, but they don't stop infection. When a child falls ill, causes are sought in curses or unseen forces. Treatment follows belief, prayers, fasting, or rituals, instead of nourishment and rest. Historians still argue whether supernatural explanations delayed effective care or simply filled a void where none existed.
Discipline begins early. Physical punishment is accepted, even for young children. The goal is obedience, believed to keep you safe and moral. But injury and stress take their toll. Broken bones heal poorly. Bruises hide infections. Emotional trauma goes unnamed, but shapes behavior. You learn caution, fear, and compliance as survival tools.
Education is limited. Knowledge about health isn't passed down systematically. Instead, you inherit habits. Wash this way, eat that, avoid this. No one explains why. Questioning elders is discouraged. Innovation is risky. The same practices repeat generation after generation, even when outcomes are grim. Humanity inches forward, dragging outdated customs behind it.
There's also deliberate exposure. Children are introduced early to adult food, adult work, adult environments. The idea is to toughen you up. Sometimes it works. Your immune system strengthens through constant challenge. Sometimes it overwhelms you. There's no buffer, no gradual transition. You're either resilient enough or you're not. Historians still argue whether early exposure increased overall population toughness or simply culled the vulnerable at great cost.
Play exists, but it's dangerous. You run through streets with carts, animals, open drains. Toys are handmade, often sharp or heavy. You fall, you bleed. Infections follow. There's no antiseptic, just cloth and hope. Like joke number 2 sneaks in gently. Medieval childhood builds character, scars, and surprisingly strong reflexes. And yet, families do their best. Parents mourn deeply, even if quietly. Communities support each other. Rituals form around loss. Survival feels communal. When a child lives past 5, it's a milestone. Past 10, a miracle. Past 15, an investment finally paying off. You're valued more with each year you survive.
Long term, these child-rearing customs shape populations. High mortality keeps numbers low. Skills are lost with young lives. Recovery from famine or plague slows. Humanity doesn't vanish, but it struggles to replace itself. Progress limps along, powered by those tough enough to endure early years that feel like obstacle courses designed by fate.
As night falls, you curl up where you can, small body pressed against warmth. You've survived another day. No one knows what tomorrow brings. There will be work, risk, hunger, maybe laughter. For now, you sleep, wrapped not just in cloth, but in centuries of habit, hope, and hard-earned resilience. One small life, carrying the future forward, step by careful step.
You wake before dawn because danger doesn't wait for daylight. Work in medieval life is not something you clock into. It's something that slowly wears you down. Every task carries risk. Not dramatic risk, but the quiet kind that accumulates. Day after day, village after village, humanity grinds itself thinner simply by doing what it must to survive.
A mainstream historical fact frames this clearly. Most medieval people work in physically demanding jobs with little protection and no concept of occupational safety. Farming, mining, blacksmithing, construction, milling, each is essential and each is hazardous. There are no warning signs, no safety manuals, and certainly no insurance forms. Injury is expected. Death is inconvenient, but accepted. You begin in the fields. Farming is relentless. You plow behind animals, inhale dust, strain muscles that never fully recover. Tools are heavy and crude. A slip of the sickle cuts deep. Infections follow. Tetanus exists, unnamed and unstoppable, and physical activity offered some protective benefits. The evidence points uncomfortably in both directions.
Mills are worse than they look. Water mills and windmills power entire communities, but they're dangerous places. Gears are exposed, belts snap. You reach in to fix a jam and lose fingers, sometimes more. Grain dust fills the air, causing chronic lung problems. A quirky but real tidbit is that millers are often viewed with suspicion, not just morally, but physically, because their work leaves them pale, coughing, and prematurely aged.
If you work with metal, the risks multiply. Blacksmiths inhale fumes from lead, mercury, and arsenic without knowing it. Burns are constant. Eyes suffer from sparks and glare. Hearing fades. You're strong, respected, and quietly poisoned over decades. Light joke number 1 drifts by. Medieval workplaces really commit to the idea of learning on the job, occasionally fatally. Construction workers face falls from scaffolding with no harnesses. Stonemasons develop lung diseases from dust. Roofers slip. Builders die mid-project, and the work continues around them. There's no investigation, just replacement. Humanity advances one cathedral at a time, built on bones no one records.
Mining is perhaps the most extreme. You descend into narrow shafts with poor ventilation, air grows thin, gases build, collapses happen. Miners develop chronic coughs and joint disease. Children work here too, small enough to fit where adults can't. Survival odds drop sharply. Historians still argue how many medieval mining communities simply disappeared over time due to accumulated health damage.
Women's work is no safer. Spinning, weaving, brewing, cooking, each carries hazards. Open fires burn skin. Heavy looms strain backs. Repetitive motions damage joints. Brewing exposes you to fumes and boiling liquids. Domestic labor kills quietly, without recognition. There are no easy jobs here, just different ways to break down. Travel for work introduces new dangers. You walk long distances carrying loads. Roads are rough. Bandits exist, but injury and exposure are bigger threats. Blisters become infected. Weather changes fast. You don't dress for comfort, you dress for durability. Even so, bodies wear out early. Light joke number 2 slips in gently. Medieval ergonomics is basically, try not to fall. Accidents aren't isolated, they cluster. When one worker is injured, others take on extra labor, increasing their own risk. Entire workshops weaken at once. Skills disappear. Productivity drops. Recovery is slow because everyone is already exhausted. Humanity doesn't just lose individuals, it loses momentum.
Medical response to work injuries is limited. Broken bones are set poorly. Amputations happen fast. Pain is endured. Rest is a luxury few can afford. You return to work before healing, compounding damage. Chronic pain becomes background noise. You learn to live with it because you must. There are moments of adaptation. Tools improve slightly. Techniques are refined. Apprenticeships pass down safer methods occasionally. But innovation is slow, constrained by tradition and cost. Historians still argue whether medieval guilds improved worker safety through regulation or simply protected profits under the guise of quality.
Environmental hazards add another layer. Tanning uses chemicals. Dyes contain toxins. Pottery glazes include lead. You don't know why you feel sick, you just accept it. Generations exposed to these substances suffer quietly, reducing fertility and resilience over time. Humanity doesn't collapse, but it limps. Children grow into these jobs early. There's no transition period. You're small, so you're useful. Injuries shape you before adulthood. Survival selects for toughness, but the cost is steep. Many never reach old age. Old age itself becomes rare, almost mythical.
As evening falls, you return home aching, hands raw, lungs tight. You eat, sleep, and repeat. Work defines your worth, but it also consumes you. You don't resent it, it's just life. But across continents and centuries, this relentless labor thins populations just enough to matter. You lie down, muscles humming with pain, breath shallow but steady. Tomorrow brings the same risks, the same tasks, the same quiet gamble. Sleep arrives like a small mercy, carrying you into another day of work that builds the world while slowly wearing away the people inside it. You look out over land that no longer looks quite right. Trees are thinner, rivers are muddier, fields stretch farther than they used to. None of this feels dramatic in the moment. It feels like progress. In medieval life, reshaping the environment is survival. But survival has side effects, and over time, those side effects quietly stack the odds against humanity itself. A mainstream historical fact anchors this shift. During the medieval period, large-scale deforestation. A mainstream historical fact anchors this shift. During the medieval period, large-scale deforestation occurs across Europe to create farmland, fuel, and building materials. Forests fall steadily. And first, this brings abundance. More crops, more homes, more firewood. You feel safer with open land around you. What you don't see yet is how much protection those trees provided.
Without forests, soil erodes. Rain washes nutrients away. Fields become less productive. You compensate by expanding agriculture further, cutting more trees, repeating the cycle. Yields fluctuate wildly. Famine becomes more likely. Historians still argue whether medieval agricultural expansion ultimately increased food security, or whether it made societies more vulnerable to climate shifts. The answer, inconveniently, seems to be both. Rivers change too. Mills, dams, and waste alter water flow. Fish populations decline. Drinking water grows murkier. You adapt by relying more heavily on ale again, which, as you remember, is less than ideal. Flooding becomes unpredictable. Settlements built too close to altered rivers suffer repeated losses. Each flood erases years of effort. Light joke number 1 drifts by softly. Medieval city planning is mostly hope the river behaves.
Overgrazing compounds the problem. Animals strip land bare. Grass struggles to recover. Dust replaces greenery. You don't notice immediately. Changes happen slowly. By the time pastures fail, it feels like bad luck, not cause and effect. Communities move, fragment, or fight over remaining resources. Humanity doesn't run out of land, it runs out of good land.
Climate shifts amplify everything. The medieval warm period offers a stretch of relative stability, encouraging expansion. Then conditions cool. The Little Ice Age arrives quietly, shortening growing seasons. Crops fail more often. Malnutrition rises. You blame weather, fate, or divine displeasure, not long-term environmental strain. Historians still argue how much human land use intensified the impact of these climate changes, but the timing is painfully aligned.
Urban growth brings its own hazards. Cities concentrate people, animals, and waste. Without forests nearby, fuel becomes scarce. You burn whatever you can: peat, dung, scrap wood. Air quality drops. Respiratory illness increases. Children cough through winters. The environment indoors becomes as dangerous as outdoors. Resource extraction accelerates. Mines dig deeper. Quarries expand. Landscapes scar. Water tables shift. In some regions, entire valleys destabilize. You don't connect the dots between a collapsed mine and long-term land degradation. Each project solves an immediate need while creating a future problem. A quirky but real tidbit involves marsh drainage. Wetlands are drained to create farmland, which feels like victory over nature. But wetlands filter water and buffer floods. Without them, disease-carrying insects increase and floods worsen. Malaria, present in parts of medieval Europe, thrives in altered landscapes. Historians still argue how widespread medieval malaria truly was, but environmental changes likely helped it linger. Firewood scarcity changes daily life. You cook less, you heat less. Homes grow colder and damper. Mold appears. Respiratory problems increase. You cluster closer together for warmth, which, as you know, helps disease spread. Like joke number 2 floats in gently. Medieval sustainability plans are mostly future you will figure it out. Environmental stress also affects animals. Livestock grow weaker on poor pasture. Disease spreads among herds. Food security drops again. You're caught in feedback loops no one has language for yet. Each solution creates another problem. And yet, innovation appears here too. Crop rotation improves soil somewhat. New plows increase efficiency. Communities adapt, slowly. These changes help, but not enough to reverse damage already done. Progress competes with depletion, and the balance is fragile. Social consequences follow. Scarcity breeds conflict. Borders harden. Trade routes strain. Migration increases. Communities clash over resources. Humanity doesn't face extinction from one bad decision, but from thousands of small ones layered over time.
As night falls, you sit by a weak fire, listening to wind where trees once stood. The land feels tired. So do you. You've done what was necessary, what everyone did. You didn't mean harm. You meant survival. But survival without foresight has a cost. You lie down, earth beneath you, altered by generations of effort and erosion. Sleep comes with a strange mix of comfort and unease. Tomorrow, you'll work the land again, trusting it to hold. For now, you rest, suspended between what was gained and what was quietly lost.
You notice it in small ways first. The air feels heavier, the nights longer, the work endless. Humanity, over centuries, has adapted, survived, and persisted, but always just on the edge. You carry the lessons of nutrition, illness, labor, childhood, and environment with you, all compiled quietly in the body and memory of generations. Tonight, as you settle into your place in this long continuum, you feel the weight of it all, not in panic, but in the gentle rhythm of history, moving slowly beneath your skin. By now, you understand that survival is never clean. Food has nourished and weakened you simultaneously.
Work has built society while quietly wearing down the workers. Disease has thinned populations without ever fully vanishing. Each choice, each adaptation, each solution has a cost you may only recognize when you pause, inhale, and look back. Historians still argue whether these compounded risks were inevitable or could have been mitigated with better knowledge, but what is certain is that medieval humanity repeatedly flirted with its limits. You trace the invisible threads connecting one decision to the next, an accidental extinction rehearsal performed over centuries.
You remember bread that teetered between sustenance and poison, salted meat that strained kidneys, swaddling that saved bones while risking life, and sweat rituals that cured nothing but discomfort. You think of the armies that marched across fields, spreading more than just fear, the children raised in harsh routines, and the water that seemed both vital and suspect. Everything has a dual nature, nourishment and threat, protection and hazard, guidance and superstition. And yet, people persisted, carried forward by resilience, ritual, and stubborn hope.
Light joke number 1 drifts gently here. Medieval life is basically a giant choose-your-own-adventure with very high stakes and no safety net. You feel it in your bones, this delicate balance between adaptation and overreach. When forests fell, soil eroded. When cities grew, disease followed. When trade expanded, contagion traveled faster than anyone could track. Every success contains the seeds of future risk. Each generation inherits both the benefits and the hidden burdens of the previous one. Humanity doesn't vanish, but it walks a narrow ridge, confident yet precarious.
By now, night has wrapped itself around the village. Fires burn low. Animals settle nearby. You hear the faint sounds of life continuing. Bells, footsteps, murmured prayers, the distant splash of water. The world you inhabit is harsh, demanding, and fragile, but it is also familiar and predictable. In the quiet, you notice how many ways life almost failed, quietly, repeatedly, and yet somehow persisted.
Food, work, illness, hygiene, childbirth, war, and environment all have left their marks. And in this understanding, there is comfort. You've walked through the mundane, the repetitive, the boring, and the dangerous, tracing the rhythms that shaped civilizations. You've observed humanity flirting with extinction in the slow, steady, cumulative ways that don't make headlines but shape survival. And despite it all, sleep arrives, softening edges, lulling the mind, steadying the breath. You drift deeper, past memories of sweat, mud, fear, and effort. Each detail becomes a soft pattern rather than a threat. The lessons of the past settle gently around you. The land, the people, the choices, they are no longer obstacles, but companions, guiding your imagination into rest. Light joke number 2 floats in as a whisper. Medieval humans might have almost gone extinct, but they sure left a lot of stories to fall asleep to. Your breath slows, limbs relax, awareness of danger diminishes. The world, chaotic and precarious moments ago, becomes a quiet rhythm. Each heartbeat syncs with the soft pulse of centuries past. You are part of a long line of people who adapted, endured, failed, recovered, and adapted again. The edge of survival hovers behind, always present, always acknowledged, but irrelevant in the gentle cocoon of night. Now the world outside your window is nothing but distant murmurs. The flicker of firelight softens into darkness. Every small threat, every calculated risk, every marginal survival has been cataloged, transformed into a lullaby of endurance. You float within it, carried on the current of time, as all previous generations have done, learning the slow, beautiful art of persistence. Light joke number 3 settles in quietly. Humanity may have flirted with oblivion, but at least it left plenty of bedtime stories to snooze through.
And as sleep fully envelops you, all those bizarre, almost fatal rhythms, the Brad, the work, the water, the disease, the forests, the armies, the children, fade gently to background hum. You rest in the knowledge that survival, fragile and precarious, is still possible, and that tomorrow will come not as a threat, but as another quiet day to experience and endure. Your body relaxes completely. Your mind drifts. You are safe, for now, carried on the soft currents of history's slow, unrelenting flow.
You feel yourself sinking further into calm. Every thought slows, every worry diminishes. The world is quiet. The cumulative weight of centuries fades into gentle patterns of breathing and warmth. You imagine the village from above, the slow rotations of daily life, the careful work and cautious survival. Nothing demands action. You float through imagined streets and fields, past people who worked, feared, and persevered, all invisible yet profoundly present. The rhythms soothe rather than alarm. The past becomes a soft lullaby, carrying you further from wakefulness.
Every heartbeat, every inhalation, every tiny shift of the body is an anchor in this calm. You let go of urgency. Nothing presses, nothing insists, nothing demands. Only the gentle sway of time and history, cradling you in its steady, patient arms. You rest fully, completely, as the slow pulse of life through generations hums a quiet, unbroken lullaby.
Finally, the last whispers of wakefulness fade. Imagination softens. The body and mind sink deeper, weightless, untethered. Darkness is no longer empty, but comforting. You are fully immersed in the quiet flow of centuries, carried gently to the edge of dreams. The world outside may be harsh, the past may have been dangerous, but now, in this moment, all is still, safe, and calm. As you drift further, allow every thought to slow. Imagine the sun setting over quiet villages, fields stretching wide and empty, rivers moving calmly through the land. Feel the soft weight of history pressing gently against your senses, not to alarm, but to reassure. Every hardship, every cautious choice, every quiet survival becomes a soft, rhythmic pulse you can follow into rest. The edges of fear and tension fade, replaced by gentle, undemanding awareness. Breath becomes the only task, steady and calm, carrying you into deeper relaxation. You feel the warmth of hearths, the hum of distant bells, and the soft murmur of life moving at a slower pace, echoing the rhythm of your own heartbeat. Everything that was tense and urgent dissolves into nothing more than the background of centuries past. You are safe. The distant echoes of toil, disease, hunger, and labor become a quiet lullaby. Sleep is no longer a goal. It is already here, soft and present, embracing your body completely. Each inhale and exhale syncs with the calm pulse of history, reassuring you that survival, persistence, and endurance are possible. Let the centuries cradle you. Let the quiet, cumulative lessons of humanity settle gently into your mind.
No action is required. No danger approaches. The past hums softly beneath you, carrying you toward complete, a slow, soothing river. Let the past, the present, and the quiet edge of survival cradle you into the gentle, endless comfort of sleep. End of script. Sweet dreams.